And this is a perfect day because we're building the computer field up a little bit with Boolean algebra and the Venn diagrams. And one of the people who may have been the father of computer science, or not computer science, but the computer architecture. From my point of view, there's actually a difference between the computer and computer science, and we'll get to that later when I do my person study. We're good. All right, this isn't quite the newest one. I actually retitled this. It's is Charles Babbage the forefather of computers, or is he just a beloved great uncle? And that'll come into play in a little bit because I changed a couple of the slides. He lived in England was born in 1792 and lived to 1871. He was a very diverse person. His vocation was, he was an analyst just trying to figure out how things work and how to make them better. He was a statistician, we all know what that is, and he was an inventor. And we're going to talk about 3 of his inventions that unfortunately never actually got put together in his lifetime. His personal interests were religious miracles, and he is quoted in our book as saying, "Miracles are not a breach of established laws, but the indication that they exist even in a higher power." So basically he's saying outside our universe, in the supernatural world, there's laws that we just don't understand. And when those intersect with our current world, those laws apply, and what we know about them doesn't. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Charles Babbage's personal attributes were that he was positive. The positive ones were he was brilliant. He came up with things that were way ahead of his time, and the argument has been made that his concepts were even ahead of the machinist abilities at their time, and that's open for debate. He was detailed oriented. In fact, these machines that we're talking about, most of them have been made in the last 20 years by craftsmen here today. He was forward looking. He came up with the analytical engine way before his time, so he was looking to our time. The idea that hydraulics or a machine, things flowing in a machine can do something is not really that new. In fact, we're using it every day today. How many of you drive an automatic transmission car? Okay, that's kind of along these lines. It's a mechanical hydraulic computer. When your engine revving so fast, it shifts your gears. When it's going faster, it shifts the gears again. It's a one-function mechanical computer. Some of the negatives he had where he was hard to work with. We'll see later on that he had people quitting all the time to move on because he's just hard to work with. He moved to the next project before the current one was done. A question for you is to think about, and it's on your paper. Maybe did he have ADHD? I myself have adult ADHD, and I find myself doing this all the time. I get focused in on something and I just stay on it until I get bored with it, then I move on to the next thing. And sometimes I'm just not focused at all for a while. My question is, and that's one of the ones that worksheet, maybe that was his problem, and maybe you can find something else to either confirm or deny it, or dispute it. He actually came up with 3 different mechanical engines. The difference engine number 1 and the difference engine number 2 are basically the same machine, except number 2 was a revision of the first one, and it did things with less parts and should have done them faster. And finally, the analytical engine, which he started in 1834, was basically a mechanical computer. It could do everything we wanted it to do now. The difference engine number 1 was designed to create plates for math tables. All those tables that we've seen, you guys, I hope you all have seen a trig table or a logarithm table. All those tables back then were handmade, hand calculated, and then they had to be typeset, and then they had to be printed. So any of the process between hand calculating by a human computer and the typesetting, this typesetter putting them into the prints, anywhere along those lines they could break and not work. He thought, well, let's make a machine that does that. Basically a fancy dancy calculator. It uses a polynomial system to do it. It was sponsored by the British government, and all they didn't care about the machine, they just wanted the good tables. The reason for that was the Brits had this huge monster empire then. They were navigating by the stars, and they had to go into their trig tables to figure out where they were based off of how high Sirius was at night on over the horizon, so they could figure out where they actually were. So they needed good tables, and in fact, some of the YouTube stuff on Babbage shows ships wrecking because the tables had an error in them.